Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us here for our first partnering to support student behavior in school. And we wanted to have this community forum because our school district is getting many questions about how we do manage student behavior and why outcomes are what they are for certain discipline incidents or protocols. So we wanted to be sure to bring you information so that you could know how things really do work in our schools, but also to discuss and be fair about what the problems and challenges are that we do face day to day and bring light to those so that you can partner with us for solutions. So we hope tonight is both educational and does give you an opportunity to make any points you would like to. We have a panel that will get introduced here in just a bit. And I would say to you that the expertise in the house tonight is great and diverse. So you'll get information from a number of sources. So to start the night, I would like to get our panel introduced so you know who you would be hearing from tonight. And also to say thank you to the panel for sharing your time with us this evening and your expertise, and I really appreciate it. And also to let the panel know at any time, if you know that there is a comment that you would like to share, please break into the action and just say so. So we do have a microphone right there, and if we could have Mrs. Stanton start with introductions, what your name is, where you work, and maybe a bit about why you wanted to be here tonight.
I'm Becky Stanton. I'm the principal at Helen Haller Elementary, and I want to be here because well, I work with kids all day, and I love to talk about all the great things they do. And I also like to talk about the ways that we support kids every day at school.
I'm Robbie Fox. I'm the assistant principal at the high school. I wanted to be here because my job is 99% working with student behaviors and coordinating with community and teachers surrounding that. So I have pretty much 7.5 hours out of my day is just about what we're going to talk about tonight.
I'm Jennifer Lopez. I'm the principal at Gray Wolf Elementary, which is our pre-K through second grade school. And I am here tonight because we are the new kind of foundation school and not just reading, writing, and math, but also behavior and the expected behaviors of a student. And so we are teaching those skills, and I'm happy to talk about it.
My name is Wes Funkhauser. I'm a school bus driver. I drive the Bambi route, and as I tell the kids every once in a while, it's my favorite route with my favorite students. I really like the kids. They're not perfect. We all have our times sometimes, but I enjoyed being with kids for a long time. I was a former band director years ago and been a school bus driver for quite a while as well.
I'm Casey Lanning. I'm the assistant principal at Haller. And just like my colleagues have shared, our job is all about kids and all about supporting kids and coordinating supports for them and for families. And that's why we want to partner with you. So that's why we're here, and that's what we want to talk about.
I'm Renee Caldwell. I teach science at Sequim Middle School. And I see around 140 kids a day, and without good behavior management, we don't really get to learn very much. So it's really important that we can manage that.
I'm Doreen Meinert. I teach second grade at Haller. I'm here because I think that one of the biggest ways to have success with students is to have a strong partnership with home. And so that's my goal tonight.
My name is Claire Bernard, aka Mrs. B. I teach at the pre-K2 school at Gray Wolf Elementary. And I'm happy anytime we can contribute to the success of individuals, no matter what age. Thank you for having me.
I'm Eric Danielson. I've been teaching upper elementary at Helen Haller for about 30 years, and I'm here to represent my 5th grade team. My name is Bill McFarland. I'm the ag teacher and FFA advisor, and I'm here tonight to share with you guys my experience with our FFA kids and my high school kids.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lucas Anna. I'm a student assistant professional for the Olympic Educational Service District. And I work in the realm of, alongside the wonderful counseling team here at the high school, dealing with mental health issues, drug and alcohol abuse, grief and loss, suicide ideation, some of the harder topics that actually can cause a lot of the disciplinary issues that we deal with. And to the youngest,
Hello, everyone. My name is Desara Vipai, and I'm happy to be here today to share with you the student perspective in this panel.
All right, so as you can see, we will hear from a wide variety of experiences in our system, and I think that is exactly the way it should be, because when it comes to student behavior can, of course, be up and down, but also the way that it is handled depends on so many factors, from developmental level to the context of the situation, to the other students involved, and to the engagement of the families outside of our school system. So we'll get started now just to talk about some of the context. Once again, when you are ready to make a comment, just take the mic and we will bring you right in. Okay. So we're gonna build a frame tonight, and I really want you to think about a triangle in your mind. And when we're thinking of this triangle, there are multiple points on it. And the multiple points of the triangle represent, of course, our student experiences, we have our staff experiences, and then we have the family engagement regarding those experiences at school. And we really want to make sure that within this triangle, we're going over all the tools that we have at our disposal, but also be very real with you about the challenges that we are facing in our classrooms, on our school buses, in our system, and how we work to mitigate those issues, but also when they do happen, have responses to them. We also are working with children, and I heard many people say that tonight. Children are in learning stages. And when you're in learning stages, that means you're going to make mistakes. And when mistakes are made, it's expected at school that we have a way to deal with them. I think what I would say is a theme tonight is that we're seeing some unexpected mistakes. And sometimes we're finding things that have an intensity level that are higher than we've probably dealt with in past decades. But I also would want to say to you, we have so many students that are doing the right thing. And I want to celebrate the fact that the majority of our students are coming to school every day and behaving just as they should. And they are actually appealing to us also to find ways to help other students be successful. So we're going to talk about size of the problem as well. All right, so here's that triangle that I introduced to you. And we'll see here that we have problematic behaviors from some students in the blue. We'll talk about that. We also see that there are expectations for student behavior from adults. So our adult network, and there are many of us with all types of roles, including your own. If you're visiting us tonight, you may not have a student in school right now, but you might have a grandchild, or you may have read about something that's happened in a school. We have expectations that we're bringing to students of, I would say, a modern era. And sometimes we end up with a mismatch. We have the green, which is represented by our system trying to address this gap. And we'll have solutions from our panel tonight about ideas for addressing the gap. We have a lot of creative ideas, but also some traditional ideas that we need to be thinking of. And then we have misperceptions. Oftentimes, when there is an issue in a school, it gets discussed. And sometimes it's discussed in a way that is very productive. Other times there are discussions that become shining a light on something that gets exaggerated. So tonight, another thing I'd like the panel to talk about is what is really happening that is the considerable issue, and what is happening that may be an exaggerated issue. And that's why I brought up all of the students that we have that are finding success in school and that our staff complement. I know the middle school, for instance, just had an assembly on Friday, over 200 students recognized for a gold honor roll. I've been in assemblies where I've watched entire school student bodies sit together, pay attention to exactly what they needed to and go through all that process. And I just sat in a movie theater with over 100 students on Friday night, middle school students, and they did exactly what they needed to. So there are successes as well, but we're here tonight to be real about the things that are perplexing to us. So this is an issue that is not just unique to Sequim. This is a nationwide issue, and these are headlines from last week. These things are happening everywhere you go. Schools are talking about this. I have been in meetings with legislators the past month. I've been in superintendent meetings in this past month. I visited each of our schools in the past 2 months, and behavior is the top discussion in all of the meetings. So we know tonight that what we're talking about, there isn't a magic bullet answer, but we want to be sure that our community is addressing it and taking it head on. So our agenda, we're going to talk a bit about what you heard from a couple of panel members. We actually teach pro-social behaviors in school, and it's taught in a developmentally appropriate way. So you'll hear a bit about that. I'd like you to know about our procedures and policies that we do have active. That's all the way from legislation down to procedures that school districts write. We have privacy requirements. I know there's often been questions in discipline incidents. Why can't I know what happened to the other kid? And there are reasons that we can't share why things happen or don't happen with other kids. We'll talk about that. And then you're going to hear from our panel, and you will have a chance too to come to the mic and ask questions and put any points out there you would like to. All right, so we'll jump in. So our proactive priorities. There is an instructional side of behavior, and that is what we call social emotional learning, SEL. And so you'll see SEL printed as an acronym. Schools love acronyms, so we're trying to dispel those tonight. But why we do this is we know that the word discipline actually comes from the word disciple, which means to teach. So our interest in discipline in schools is to be educating the behavioral side. And it takes longer to do that. There are behaviors where you would like just to point it out and say enough. But sometimes it's important to teach why that is enough. Because if we can be proactive there, we won't see it again, or we'll see it diminish. This is a place where it's a challenge for schools, and we'll hear from that. It's about time. Time is the most significant resource in a school's program because we have so much that we have to cover. But I think the SEL has taken a different priority in this era. The when. We teach when it's appropriate. So developmental levels have different times in their school day or school program in which this is prioritized, and in different ways, because the way you're going to approach a teenager may not be the same way you'd sit a kindergarten class down for a lesson. But the when is really important, because if it doesn't happen soon enough, and if it doesn't happen in a timely fashion, we miss windows for students to get what they need. I also want to talk about the when for family. The when of discipline starts when we know our students are so very young. And our school system, of course, we do have a very limited pre-K program right now. We are looking to expand into the world of younger students with looking at transitional kindergarten. And the reason for that is we know the earlier schools can engage with students, the more fortunate we are to have time with them to teach these things. We also would love to engage with our communities in the way parents of young children would say would be supportive. So we can help with this, because the younger we teach it, the better. It is very challenging to have a 13-year-old, 17-year-old, and try to be teaching things that probably would have been best taught when they were 4. So we really have to work toward that end as a community. We'd like to partner with you around that. Where do we teach it? Well, this is everywhere all the time. So, we have our bus driver, and, it starts at 6:30 in the morning, quite honestly, right? And it also happens as students are departing the bus, just us moving students from them getting off the bus at the stadium to their schools. There are educational opportunities right there. The classrooms, the hallways, the lunchroom, the extracurriculars, all of it. So it's an all-encompassing effort on a school's part. And we know that we have to learn new ways to do this, but we also know some tried and true things that we may not be working with as much as we used to. We probably need to discuss those because there are folks who would say, it worked for me. The what and how we teach, and panel members, please dive in here because they are the experts at how we do this. So look at all these acronyms. We have PBIS, and that is Positive Behavioral Intervention Supports. PBIS is a framework, and it is how we actually have students understand that there are positive ways that we can intervene so that you won't have as much of a discipline need down the line. I'll give you an example. You have younger students walking in the hall, and we have one who starts to run. Instead of saying, no running, one of the way we are proactive to be intervening positively is walking in the hall, slow and steady as we go, just making sure we're always pumping these pro-social behaviors into students. And in classrooms, they're actually teaching lessons on PBIS. We also have MTSS, which is multi-tiered systems of support, where we see students are having a lesson with everyone else, and they might need something extra or different. We're able to say, we can give you a different way or approach. We try to do this right up through extremes that we might face if we have a student who really needs a completely different program. CI3T is our newest, and we had team members go to that training just today. Who on our panel was there today? Okay. This is comprehensive integrated three-tiered models of prevention, really looking at how our instruction, and not just around behavior, but the focus right now for CI3T is on behavior. How can we make sure our program is indeed comprehensive and touching all of those targets? RTI is response to intervention. Are we giving kids what they need so that when they struggle, they don't feel they need to act out? We proactively engage them in learning. SEL is social emotional learning. And then check-in, check-out model is that we have some students who are on a plan where they are brought into school in the morning. We check in. How's your day so far? What do you need to be successful? What do you want? Review what their benchmarks are for the day. Then we check out at the end of the day. Did you meet your goals? Very individualized. Okay, I'm going to stop with my voice. Anyone on our panel like to add anything about PBIS? Or, yeah, who's doing this?
I just want to talk about the social emotional learning and what that means, because when I was asked to be the SEL teacher, I went, SEL, SEL, I'm already doing that in a nursery, you know, because anyway, I'm just letting you know that I didn't know what that meant, right? And so social emotional learning is the process in which all of us as individuals start to learn and practice managing our emotions, making and establishing and nurturing relationships, how to set goals, how to create and practice responsible decision-making. All these things happen at home and at school, and when you're on a bus, and when you're in the grocery store, and when you're shopping for gifts for a loved one. That happens all the time. And so I just wanted to make sure that we know that's what social emotional learning is. So to take the mystery a little bit out of it.
And what Claire didn't share is that she is our social emotional teacher at Grable. So all of our kindergarten through second grade students get to visit with her every single week and work on the skills that she's sharing about. So that's a huge bonus for our youngest learners to have that foundation of 3 years with her and having that weekly practice in addition to social emotional learning curriculum that they do with their teachers in the classroom.
And then I just want to speak real briefly to MTSS. So oftentimes when you are hearing about discipline issues, we are in the category called Tier 3. Tier 3 is when things have escalated beyond a classroom management situation or a building management situation and are liaisoning with community resources. Sometimes at the high school level, that might look like a probation officer. It might look like drug and alcohol counseling, but it's pulling in those outside resources. For perspective, we deal with less than 1% of our total population at a tier 3 level. So when we're talking about these massive responses to certain types of behaviors, we have to be clear that we're talking about less than 1 in 100 kids. So most of our student population operates at tier 1, classroom managed, and then some occasionally operate at tier 2. Our tier 3 usually have very specific pathways that they've entered into and are moving through. So just so we're keeping that nice and differentiated, we don't have tier 3 for our large student body. It would be unsustainable.
I'd like to share about PBIS. We've had PBIS in our building for the last 10 years. And what I love about PBIS is a couple things. One, it's a research-based framework. Schools all over the country use it. It's free. You can get support. And you work it around your school. You create a behavior matrix with your staff about how you operate in all areas of the school. So it's super clear for every single student in the building what they should be doing. And like Superintendent Nichols said, we often talk about what we want kids to do, and that is the whole point of positive behavior interventions and supports. The other piece to comprehensive integrated 3-tiered model of prevention. In our training this afternoon, we have buildings in differing spots in terms of a behavior matrix, let's say. We spent time today talking about what that would look like at every single building and what sort of supports we want to make sure we have in tier 1, in tier 2, and tier 3. There's a nice streamlined way for us to do that as a district. So I felt that was very helpful for us today.
I'm not going to speak, I guess, on any of these. Just I want to point out, because I haven't heard it yet, that none of these up here can be successful if we don't have relationships with kids. And so that really is our step one from the first minute of the very first day, is to start building relationships with our kids and then continuing that throughout the day and throughout the year.
A lot of I can't really speak on the grade school level, but here at the high school, I think a huge part of what I do in offering support is empowering the kids to make the positive decisions. Like, they're going to do what they're going to do. You can't really influence that. And the more you tell them no, the more they swing towards the yes vote. So letting them know what the actions will be to their actions is a key part. And then also, like, I don't know, snacks, drinks, those kind of things. But like you said, relationships, it all starts in the beginning with relationships being consistent. So even with everybody, how many students we work with, it's really tough. But if being consistent is like probably my main goal, like at least shouting out to them at least once a day if possible.
So I want to kind of piggyback on what Luke said, because we work kind of hand in hand together. I really do feel that way out in ag. But one of the things we have out there, I always say out there because it's different than in here. I don't have always. So we have greenhouses and we have different things that we can actually put these kids that are getting, I call it bored. And so we put in a work out there. Example today, I had a young man that's really kind of squirrely. Yeah, I call him kind of, he's just squirrely. So I stopped him and said, hey, you want to be successful today? And he said, yeah. I said, all right, we're going to go out in the greenhouse and you're going to start tearing these tables apart. And he went out there and he worked his tail off. And he was so proud of himself when he came back that he said, this was great. And I said, yeah. I said, so you can do this if you have the option. And that's kind of like what Luke is working with, is he's working with these kids, and these kids are stopping and thinking, okay, what do I need to do to make myself successful? And they're doing it because of some of the training that he's given them and some of the backing that we have as far as our administrators. So, you know, that's some of the things that we're doing out there. And it's always more relaxing when you can actually play in the dirt. Yeah.
Also just mention about the PBIS, and it's about having a common language that everyone in the schoolhouse knows. So if we say that's unexpected, that means that it's not expected here, where you're at, whether it's in the classroom, in the hallway. If we say zero voice, people know that's no talking. If we say, oh, it's a whisper. So there's all these languages that we use in school that empowers the teachers and the children to understand what they're talking about. And it'd be great for, right now I'm teaching about Kelso choices. Kelso choices are strategies and plans to solve small problems for children to do. They're taking that home. Now the parents are, and the families are saying, hey, now you're having a small problem. Can you ignore it? Can you walk away? Can you tell them to stop? Can you go to another game? So we're empowering them to then teach, in a sense, the families this language. So it's reinforced. It's this lovely community of common language from the PBIS. So
Thank you all. So now we're going to move to procedures, processes, and policies. And before I talk about those, I want to talk about a shift in our conversation. The proactive moves that are being made by teachers every single day are well ingrained. And as you heard, we're going to trainings to learn more and to try to get new things integrated. But the truth is, sometimes these proactive measures are not resulting in full compliance, right? So I want to talk to you about the top bullets I'm hearing from teachers and administrators that are problems in the schools with behavior. And I also had the pleasure of talking with high school students directly today, and I will share some of their comments as well. Okay, some of the issues. Overreactions to normal challenges. Conflict management between the students. Disrespect toward teachers and authority. Self-management is an issue. Emulating behaviors from media. The challenges of how to be a friend. And in talking to the students today, the high school, the quotes that I received were that disrespect was the #1 issue that they saw, language. And then also the fact that there were rules being broken, like we have vaping going on in the schools. And the students agreed that the size of the problem actually was not that significant. What their worry is that as it continues to seem as though there aren't adequate consequences, more people might try to latch on to those behaviors and emulate those with peer pressure. So I'm sure those on the panel, hearing those, I see the nods, it's real. So I'd like to give the panel a chance to talk about some of those bullets and others that they're experiencing. So you get behind the scenes of what's really happening. And those news headlines that we saw at the onset of this, if you read those articles, and I have some of them here, you'll see in them that educators are saying, I don't know if I can keep this up. This is coming to a place where it's driving me potentially out. What is going to be done about this? Where are the consequences? And I'll talk about some of that, but I'd like to have folks have a chance to weigh in because this is real. And I'm going to tell you, every single adult that I've been talking to, even the ones who are telling me personally, I am reevaluating it. This is the job for me. They want to be here. They love kids. It's just so stressful. So.
I guess from my perspective, over 30 years, I sometimes ask myself, well, how did we get to the point where we are now? And it seems like around the year 2000 was the start of a tipping point, but maybe we didn't realize it at the time. But I sometimes will hear people in the community say things like, well, if we just did like we used to do with discipline, it would solve everything. And I just don't think people realize that the kids today, some of the more severe things that they're facing in their home lives whether it's somebody in the family with an addiction or that's been incarcerated or just being abandoned completely by a parent, does amazingly bad things to children. And that seems to have kind of accelerated. And there was something that our former career director here said to me once. It said, the year 2010, she had homeless students that she worked with, and they knew that they were in an unusual situation. But then by 5 years later, she had homeless students and they just felt that that was the norm. They didn't really realize that that was an unusual situation for them to be in. So I think a lot of the things that we're doing as a district are stepping into sort of the void that maybe some parents used to do. And then we're trying to pick up that slack of this is how you should have been taught at home.
So I want to speak on in the job, we have to become more and more creative about the approaches that we take to how we're going to solve problems with kids, how we're going to support staff, how we're going to support parents, because the problem keeps getting more and more complex. And what I guess the success of that is that in that process, everyone seems to understand that the problem is complex. And so when we reach out to you, whether it's administrators, as teachers, as support staff, we're not reaching out to you because we haven't tried X, Y, Z. We're reaching out to you because we've tried X, Y, Z. That's not having the same return on investment that it used to. And we just really need your support. The challenge is when we all hear, well, I understand that, but I don't know what to do here. And so what I found is in building bridges with parents, building bridges with teachers, is just being really authentic and saying, you know what, let's figure it out together. And that's worked really well. I think that every administrator you're going to find, we definitely want to help students. And we have a lot of resources, but sometimes we don't always know what works for that family. And so that's why we want to partner with these families, because you know your kids best. We're stewards in these positions, and we want to help your kid get across through the year, through the school, whatever it be.
One of the things that Superintendent Nichols touched on is a common thing that we noticed with our littlest ones, and that's the emulation of what they see in the media, whether it's on a tablet or a phone or a movie or whatever. It's surprising when you have, and very unexpected, when you have a 5-year-old who's saying these lines that sound directly out of a movie, and like a big kid movie or an adult movie. And so kind of understanding that there are times where developmentally they don't know the difference between reality and what they're watching, because in their mind they see people, real people saying and doing these things, and they don't know yet that actually in real life people don't typically say and do those things. And so a lot of education on our part in working with families about, you know, what kids are viewing with technology is so interesting because kids have such access. I mean, how many little people do you know teaching parents and grandparents how to use an app or do something on a phone, because it's just innate. They're just digital natives, and most of us were not. And so they can navigate to the things that they want to pretty fluently. And so finding ways to help families see that developmentally they just aren't ready for that, and they can't separate that from reality. And that helps us curb the unexpected behaviors that you wouldn't historically have seen from the smallest kids.
I just wanted to add that, for me, I definitely see the educational opportunities that all the teachers and the staff provides to all students. You see it all the time in class, in the hallways, wherever we are. I feel like the teachers are always trying to do better, to improve, and to have those relationships with the kids, but I also think that it's a process of the kids, like when they first come to a school, when they are new, they're all fired up, ready to be loud, to make a noise. And then as time goes, they kind of like fit in into groups and they get quiet and more. And so that's when the real challenge starts for the teachers, in my opinion, to try to reach down to those kids and to try their best to keep them engaged and lead them the right way, the right direction, and not let them get influenced by the friendship groups or the random thoughts. Yeah.
So I teach second grade at Haller, and so my little people are around the bigger-ish people. And something that became pretty obvious to me this year is the minimal, maybe not minimal, the less severe behaviors that I see in second grade compared to what that behavior might look in fifth. With that said, though, I'm catching myself now talk more with parents about smaller behaviors that maybe before didn't seem like such a big deal. But when I see what they become more clearly now, those little problems are little now. And so if we address them now, right, when they're younger, then they don't escalate and become something big later on. I mean, defiant, right? I have, kids blatantly ignore me, then don't even acknowledge I'm talking to them about something so silly. It's silly now, right? And so that conversation has to happen with parents that I know this might be little, right? It might seem like it's nothing, and it might seem like I'm nagging, right? But just know that it's not. Like, the end goal is for them to not have these problems when they're older, and they're big problems.
All right, thank you all.
I'd like to share a couple of things about our state and local guidance. Our state guidance comes in the form of RCWs and WACs. So we actually have discipline response and behavior management response legislated to us. Now, in some ways that can be helpful because it means that you have school districts all rowing in the same direction, trying to prioritize the same things. There are other instances, though, where that becomes a real challenge because every discipline incident that has any significance to it has a context. And when you have context, that means you have details. And when it comes to details, you can't always have a general legislated obligation meet your needs. So that's when our professionals get relied upon to make moves with discipline that are very unique and on the fly. It's not easy. When you have a student in your classroom who is needing a significant response and you have 23 to 30 others with you, it's a dance. And I'll speak for teachers here and say that one thing I've heard over and over again is when the teacher makes the move to contact the family, what they'd appreciate more than anything, and I think this goes for administrators too, I think Casey, you were alluding to this, is the recipient of the phone call. We appreciate you hearing us out because it is a harder job to call and to relay the information than it is to stay quiet. And that type of a potentially conflict-inducing phone call is not our goal. Our goal is remedying the situation and supporting the student. So that is getting more and more challenging for us. And we thank you for taking the time just to hear us because it's critical. But I've also had questions come up about zero tolerance policies. Why aren't schools invoking zero tolerance? Well, that's because this is OSPI, our Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. These are the discipline and behavior support priorities. I'm just going to read them to you. Number 1, engage families. Here we are. Students and staff in discipline decisions. We also started a discipline behavior support work group, and some folks on that work group are here now. We started this summer. A ways to go, but we're doing it. Second thing, eliminate zero tolerance discipline policies and practices. Eliminate. Remember how I had in that triangle, there are some misperceptions? There's a mismatch of what the expectations are from folks who may expect things of schools and what schools are being asked to do. Next, adopt positive and instructional approaches to behavior. All of those acronyms you saw, those are our efforts to do so. Disrupt inequitable discipline decision-making processes. Research promotes strategies for neutralizing implicit bias in discipline decision-making. I will say what Doreen brought up about establishing relationships, that's how you do it. You get to know your kids and families really well, and we do strive for this. I will say for teachers, it's not an easy road, especially the first 9 weeks of school. You have 23 to 30 new kids. You've got to learn them all and all their moves that they make and try to establish strong bonds. I'm actually in awe of teachers and how quickly that happens in classrooms. Focus on the classroom context and data-informed decision-making. We are starting to collect information on discipline. Our discipline work group this summer talked about how can we enter discipline data? How can we be looking at that? We just had an early release day on Friday. What did our staff do? Look at information about their discipline and behavior support programming and what's working and what's not. We're trying to get to these priorities, but when we have community that expects zero tolerance, we have guidance that takes us in the opposite direction. So I know that there are some of you have come with comments tonight. We'll get to those because that might be some of what you're frustrated by. Further, we have local guidance. We do have policies. 3207 is our anti-bullying. 3241 are our policies for student discipline. We have procedures that we write to try to get at, do we have what we need to actually have a strong program? I think our panelists would say there are times where those policies work, and then times where we say that we're going to do something, or we say we're going to have an outcome, and we don't. And that's where we start to hear things like there are no consequences anymore. The road to consequence is an interesting one these days, and I'm sure you all can share stories about that. And that's one thing we need to get to tonight, and we'll hear your comments about that. Our behavior management starts with the proactive. The relationship is the key. Our instructional moves are the key, but when it doesn't work, we do have to invoke the discipline. Our ability to suspend students is alive. We can do that. It's not easy. You have to meet certain standards for suspension. We have to still provide education in the suspension environment. We have to be able to try to find alternatives to suspension because we know many students who are suspended go home to no one in the home. And so during the day, it's not that they're receiving more remediation about what they didn't do well. It's that they may not have anyone there to guide them at all. We also know with expulsion, that's when you're telling a student you are kicked out of the school system. Expulsion is always an absolute last resort. It has very strict compliance rules in our state around that. And the days of telling a student you're no longer welcome here, it's not like that anymore. We have the responsibility for students' education. We want to support students, especially ones that we know school's not the best match. So what I'd like to do is open up to the panel about consequences. Where do we have them? Where do they work? Where do they don't work? Just your comments though.
I'd love to talk about consequences. So that's kind of what I do all day, but I want to be super clear before we get into it. Consequences do not end at a punishment. Right? I'm going to give you kind of an anecdotal example just to kind of capture that idea. Student A steals money from student B. We do all the school-related things. Student B doesn't like student A anymore. Their friends now don't like student A. Student A no longer has that friend group portion. There's now conflict with that student. It impacts their math class. So there are consequences that the school doesn't always have full control over. And that's something that I need to be real with you about, is that I still work with those students through that whole process. Right? We do stuff around restorative justice, not necessarily as a means of righting the wrongs, but the reality is you have to go back to class with the person whose money you stole. They don't like you. What's that going to look like? Because you still have to go to class. So there's a lot of different ways that consequences can show up. And you're familiar with these in your own personal lives, I'm sure, when you've had a conflict with a person or you yourself have dropped the ball at an important event or important function, that it doesn't just end, right? There are perceptions that people have of you. There are teachers who have had an interaction with you. There is an administrator who has a relationship with you, right? That these are all shaped by those events. So a lot of what I try and work with is in that line of instruction around how do we survive our consequences? How do we thrive in our consequences? And this is that piece where we're seeing more and more lack of resilience in people, right? Parents are tired. I can't tell you how many times this year I've called home for the 5th or the 6th time around a particular kid around an identical issue. It's the same thing, it just keeps happening. And the parent says, I just don't know what to do. How do you, as an educational institution, provide those types of supports to help build consequences that are not only viable, but productive? Because like we're talking about, if a student is being irresponsible and it impacts the learning environment, they have consequences. Let's say it's a suspension. Well, like Superintendent Nichols was talking about, if there's no one home and they're out for 3 days and then they come back, what did they learn? What's going to change, really? So a lot of the stuff that we're working at the high school is trying to tap into those upstream conditions, right? And that's kind of the idea behind what we're talking about SEL instruction at those lower levels, is that there's a component here of growth and development that needs to happen. Well, when we're 15, 16, 17, you still need that, even if you didn't get it before. We are not absolved of responsibility because, well, they didn't get it when they were 5. We'll wait till they're done with, I don't, right? We have to do something. And so a lot of what the work I'm doing is focused around is about building that capacity with the family specifically. So that's just an important piece of this puzzle, is that really I can suspend a student, but unless it changes the behavior, it's a pointless practice. That's only going to put that kid in more harmful situations of being unobserved, unwanted at a place where they feel like they should be wanted, and not supported by the people around them, because there might not be anyone. So consequences have to fit that criteria of a moving forward component at the high school level.
I know it's different as a school bus driver, because we're moving down the highway. And there's got to be attention outside the bus as well as inside the bus. And that's always a bit of a, well, as you can understand, as I think about driving down to school, down Highway 101 with about 40 to 50 free agents behind me. That's the way I think of it. Kindergarten through 12th, all back there. And one of the things I've tried to foster on the school bus since I've been on that bus is that this is a family. This bus, Route 6, the family bus, we are a family. So older kids take care of younger kids. We're in this together. It wasn't always that way. When I first started, heard a lot of language, even when the younger kids were on the bus. And I told the guy, I just kept telling him, I wrote out lots of conduct reports and made lots of phone calls and said, 0 tolerance on this stuff, because I want this to be a G-rated. That's gotten a lot better. I kind of had to be the mean guy for a little while, which is not my thing, but just had to have 0 tolerance on it. But now it's gotten so much better in that respect that a high school girl who I know uses language all the time, because I just know she does. So, because she'll get up, she'll start talking to me in the afternoon about something she's excited about. She's got her license, and all of a sudden she throws in a word. She's talking to me, she's and blah blah blah. And I look at her and I say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." So she's learned a lot from that, and she's able to control that better. I think of consequences on the bus that I can use. I can call parents. I can write them up. I can change their seats. I can do a lot of things. One student, just to give you an example, about a month ago, started riding the bus for the first time. He and his brother, I'll call him John, that's not his name. Third grader, first week, he was fantastic. He really was a good rider. Something though changed in his mind about a week into it, and we're going down Highway 101. I see him change seats. We're going 55 miles an hour. I tell the kids from time to time, that's the danger zone of the bus is the aisle. Stay out of it all the time. Try to give them every reason to do the right thing. And I tell them, I'm not trying to keep you from having fun. I'm trying to keep you safe, and your parents want you more safe than I do, if that's possible. So if I call them and I tell them you're not being safe, they're going to be on my side. So just be safe. But anyway, he started moving, and I gave him the eye the first time, He did it again. And I could tell, something's going on with John. And he kept doing it. And I finally got on the microphone and I said, John, you got a choice to make. You either stop doing that, or I'm going to call your parents when I get back to the bus barn. Your choice. You decide. A couple minutes later, he decided, all right. He kept moving. And I said, okay, now I'm going to call your parents. But he kept going up Blue Mountain. He's still doing that. Finally, I stopped the bus and say, John, come up to the front seat. It's another thing I can do. Just think of the consequences. He gets up to the front seat, and I said, John, sit down. He won't sit down. I said, John, there's other students on the bus that want to get home. We're not going until you sit down. And I realized that was one thing I couldn't lose that battle. I said, John, you have to sit down. We're not going. Very angrily, he sits down. And for the next 10 minutes, he's fuming the whole time. Got to the bus stop and get him off. And as soon as I get back to the bus barn, I call. Talk to Dad. He tells me about how John was in trouble all day because his mom has cancer and is having surgery. So I found out a whole lot about John. He's upset. And but he still was doing the wrong thing. So I wrote him up because I told him I would. I wrote up the whole thing because he's not being safe. And he gets on the bus the next morning. First thing he says is, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. And I said, John, first thing that popped in my head was, just remember, I'm on your side. He gets back in the bus, and I know this stuff's going on. So he's getting on the bus in the afternoon, and I say, hey, how's your mom? We talked about his mom and stuff, and he's doing okay, and I think she's gonna be okay and everything. And that whole afternoon, he's really good. He's not perfect. He's never perfect. No, none of the kids are perfect, but he's really good. He's trying really hard. And we're about 5 minutes away from his stop, getting off. And all of a sudden I hear, bus driver Wes? I said, yes. He said, am I doing good? Yeah, you're doing good. And that, I've never had that defiant attitude from him ever since then. I'm not saying he's perfect. I have to remind him, hey, come on, But one of the things I'd like to convey to the kids is that they know that I care about it. I care about the kids. And of course, safety is part of that, but it's more than that. I really care about it.
Right? I want to piggyback off of what Robbie was saying. Well, and you, I guess. That was great. Finding consequences that match the behavior can be really tricky. Right? We go back to what Superintendent Nichols was saying, where discipline is teaching, right? It's not a punishment. Consequences can't be punitive. They just can't be. Because for some of those kids with those really strong behaviors, this might be the only place that they're safe. And if we start punishing and they lose that safe space, the behavior just becomes an even larger problem, because now we've also lost the relationship, which again was step one. That's all.
Okay, well, my colleague over there, Robbie, I was talking about complexity and the creativity, and I think he did a really great job of making that more vivid than I did. So I also want to get back to the policies and procedures things. As administrators, yes, we are tasked with maintaining discipline and also moving learning and ensuring not just the student is successful, but ensuring that the teacher is successful in, this thing that we call education. And that's not the only, those are not the only roles that we deal with as administrators. And each one of those different groups has different policies and procedures. And one thing that can be really frustrating for parents at times is, as Superintendent Nichols was talking about earlier, was we can't always share the story. And so that's why we go back to, hey, you know your kid better than we do. This is where we need help. And if we ask to meet with you, if we ask to have a conversation with you, I hope that we can assume that our hearts are in the right place when we're trying to call for support. Because as Doreen shared, as anyone on this panel shared, we really love what we do. And we really love working with kids. And, you know, the policies and procedures, those are there, but those are not there, you know, to hamper what we're doing. They're there to support what we're doing. And we also want to be authentic. We want to let them know, let you know that, you know, what we do has a rhyme and a reason. So I would just say, in the spirit of what Wes was sharing, you know, we want to get your kid home at the end of the day, but we also want to get every kid home at the end of the day. And to do that, there has to be things that we ask them to do. And when they don't do that, there's a process. So of how we solve that.
So a couple of thoughts I want to share that we talk about a lot in elementary is that all behavior is communication. And often what they're doing is communicating 80% of the time. And this is from research, 80% of the time they're communicating, actually their behavior is based on an academic deficit, right? It's easier to be in trouble than it is to not know what you're doing or to not be smart. It's easier to act out than acknowledge that you need help. And especially when you're little, like sometimes the little ones can't pinpoint why they're frustrated and can't just say, hey, I actually don't know how to do this math. And instead they just kind of blow up and have a meltdown because they can't do it. And so a lot of the consequences, if you will, for young people are actually identifying what lagging skills they have and helping meet those needs. And so it's a lot of education. It's putting a lot of supports into academics starting early on so that they don't have the need to have those meltdowns and to get frustrated because they're successful in what they do. Every kids do well if they can. Adults do well if they can, right? And so if they're not doing well, then oftentimes it looks like a misbehavior. And so trying to help identify those areas of weakness and build them up.
Thank you. I'm going to switch gears for a moment. We'll still hear from our panel. We're approaching 7 o'clock and I'd like there to be plenty of time for community input. So the next slide. Privacy requirements. I just want to say to you, it's FERPA. That's the Educational Rights and Privacy. Also, we have privacy that is important for individual information. And even though these are students under the age of 18, they still have a right to privacy. So we are going to be working in the school district to make sure that we preserve that. Speaking with parents is a challenge when you want information about other kids, and we'd be happy to answer any questions about that and how we can follow up with you. What I'd like to do is to have our panel now respond to any community comments. And if you'd like to make a comment, we'd like to have you just come up so we can hear you on the microphone. And I'll open it up at this time. I don't think it's on yet. So okay.
Hello, everybody. My name is Derek. For those who don't know who I am, Miss B. My daughter loves you, by the way. I can't wait. Yeah, I know you know who that is. Okay. Anyway, I took some notes while I was listening and I was thinking about this before this panel even happened. They might be a little jumbled, so just bear with me because I was, so I think, okay. First thing, and this is not all parents, but there's just some parents just don't care enough. Unfortunately, that's sad reality. So no matter what we do, we won't get any help from some of these parents, which means the kid's not gonna get any help either, no matter what we do. A lot of them, well, not a lot, but some of them have this perspective of, well, it's your job, you deal with them. I've dealt with them for these hours, now we just drop the kids off, you deal with them. You do, it, you know, unfortunately, how it is. So we're never gonna get rid of it because of that, because not all parents are gonna carry them, sadly. Social media, unfortunately, makes everything even worse, because now we can instantly say something online and everybody can see it. Just like that, instead of how it was before, which is still bad, but anyway. From a personal perspective, because I've been dealing with bullying forever, my daughter deals with it, I dealt with it. There's two things that I see that are bad, and it's home life, like some of the teachers talk about. If their home life is bad, they're gonna act out at school because they're gonna get the attention at school. Because they're not getting it at home, for whatever reason. And the other one is peer pressure, which there was also mentioned. They wanna be popular, accepted in school, so a lot of times they're gonna act out because, oh, this kid's gonna like me because I acted out. And that's never gonna change either, unfortunately. So we talk about all these things, but I don't know if there's a clear solution that's ever gonna end it, because it's just life. And the last thing I wanted to point out was a lot of things that happen in school don't matter after we get out of school. These kids pick on these kids and they get out of school and then they're friends because this peer pressure goes away. But sometimes it's too late because the kid's already affected enough that it doesn't matter. So, anyway, that's just my thoughts. Thank you.
Back there.
So Derek,
Yes.
I think you've always been a super responsive parent, and for that, I've always been appreciative. One of the things as you were talking, sometimes it can feel a little hopeless. But what I would share with you, as like many of the panel members up here talked about, is it's the power of relationship. And if kids don't have it at home, they're still looking for it. I know it may not seem that way sometimes, but they really are. I cannot tell you how many times I've watched a student that we've had pre-K to 5, right? And then they come walking back as a high schooler, look at me, or hey, I just joined the Marines. They come back to the places where they had relationship because they felt loved and cared for. So it may feel a little hopeless sometimes, but overall, people in schools and community members, when they create relationship, it's a game changer for any kid.
Right, I agree.
Yeah.
I think sometimes some kids don't get it enough.
Yeah.
You know, and so it happens enough that they just don't feel like it's gonna matter, so they don't even try sometimes.
Yeah.
I was just gonna add to Becky, sorry, it does take a lot of people to build that relationship when they only get it at school. I've seen it be from the staff in the office to even our custodial staff, building relationships, doing the SEL work with our kids, doing check-in, check-outs with our kids. At school, it's all hands on deck, all the time.
I'd like to add that if there are folks online listening and you'd like to comment, just put up your raised hand feature. We will alternate between in person and those on Zoom. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Cindy, and I don't have any children in this district, but I have children in Wisconsin. At Thanksgiving, I heard from my grandson about behavior problems in class. And my son agreed, yes, there are significant issues that are keeping. Well, okay, I'm thinking of that 1% in the third tier that we talked about here. And there's probably greater than 1% in the second tier maybe, but still a small percentage. But what about that larger percentage that is suffering disproportionately from that small percentage that is getting that attention? And I have a very responsible grandson, and he's is concerned about. He's 11 years old. And I just wonder, what is the protocol when this occurs in a class that a teacher is not able to keep this 1%er in the perspective of good classroom management? Do they go to the office? Do they get sent back to the room? What happens to make that a good place for that greater percent that is trying to learn?
That's a great question. I have a answer for it, but the problem is that my wife tells me if I had a superpower, it'd be over explaining things. So not going to do that right now. It depends. So the short answer truly is that it depends on what the antecedents to this were, who the actors were, and what the outcomes were in that incident. I can't tell you that if we have a student who disrupts the classroom environment that we then do this, because that is the definition of a zero tolerance policy. But what I can tell you is that we do something. So depending on, I'll give you two different examples and I'll call it good there. And we can talk more after this if you want a longer answer so people don't have to fall asleep while I'm talking. But let's say that we have a student who is suffering from a poor home life for reasons beyond their control, and they are having defiance and disrespect with their teacher. Much of what I'm going to do is going to be lashing onto that student to connect with that teacher and with other adults at school, broadly speaking. Situation number two, a student is having bullying problems at school and they don't want to go to a class. And so they're acting out inside class, so they're sent out. In that situation, I would work with that student to identify the bullying. I would address the bullying. Usually there's a back and forth component, not always, but most of the time. And I would come up with scaffolds to help those students manage their relationships. Sometimes that means a pretty strict no contact policy. Sometimes it means a sit down, the three of us are going to talk this out and write down a contract that we're agreeing on our behavior expectations moving forward. Those are just two really small examples, but the reality is that we do something for each of them. We just don't do the same thing for each of them. And I think that that's where it can feel a bit convoluted at times, is that there is no clear answer because there's no clear problem, right? We have a clear symptom, but that symptom is not our problem, right? The symptom is the thing that we are seeing or experiencing. The problem is much more complex and deserves a complex response.
Are there teachers on the panel like to speak to that?
My honest answer would be that as behaviors escalate, I honestly feel I cannot give as much as I used to all students in the classroom.
I think that you're representing a concern of teachers as well, because they're very tired when that 1, 2, or 3 people constantly hijack the classroom, the lesson, and there is a fatigue that is real. And I just want that to be, them to be represented and heard.
I second that. I heard that.
So I agree with my teachers, and I'll also say that that is our, as administrators, that is a big thing that we try to avoid. We try to ensure that there is equity in the classroom for all students. And then that everyone is getting what they need. It may not be what they want, but it's what they need. And so that can't happen in isolation. That happens in the context of, as Robbie talked about, larger supports beyond just the administrator, beyond just the counselor, or beyond just the teacher. So I would just say, yes, we see that as well.
I'd just like to bring up something that might be unique to people who aren't generally in schools day to day. In our state, we have a classroom exclusion rule. So when you have a student who acts up in a classroom to the degree that the teacher no longer can manage the situation, or might call the office and say, I'd like to manage the situation, but not in here, right? We have basically almost like a time limit. it's not a defined time, but it has to be only a reasonable time for which that student is excluded from the classroom. So the effort is always made to try to get the situation addressed, but have the student return unless it's egregious. And what we're wrestling with here in our district, I'll tell you, is what is the pattern of something happening over and over again? That it may not be egregious in one instance, but when it is times 7, it's enough. So there are so many pervasive just details in the behavior procedure and OSPI direction that we have to follow that I would say, and I don't want to speak for teachers, but it's a challenge. And I think administrators try to rise to the call, but when you're running against timelines and you're trying to think about what discipline codes we have, it's not easy. But thank you all for working at it like you do. All right, next. And I don't see anyone online yet. Okay.
I'm John Zerner. I've had grandkids, great grandkids, and great great grandkids go through the school system here. My question is, are there any boys demanding to go into girls' facilities or girls demanding to go into boys' facilities? And if so, how's it being handled?
So in our school district, we do have rules around transgender services and what's required. And so when you are a student who is a boy and you're asking to go into a girl's restroom, the first decision that we're going to have to make is if you are a biological boy who identifies as a boy, asking to go into a girl's restroom would not be allowed. But if you are a biological boy and you identify as a female, then that is different. Your self-expression and your self-identity is what we recognize and respect. So we would allow a student to use the bathroom for the identity that they identify with. The number of students, though, that are requesting such is extremely low.
That's good.
And it's,
That's
yeah.
unfortunate that it's that way.
Okay, so I wanted to address it because out in ag, right? So out in ag, we have one bathroom. Okay, so it's, you go in, you lock the door, it's one person, one time, in and out. Okay, so there is options. Just so you know that somebody's not gonna walk in on somebody. So we have our bathroom on our side in E6, and then the Sealy has her bathroom on her side, which is E7, both doors locked, one bathroom, one kid, okay?
Great.
Thank you. I do have someone online I need to turn to, and I believe that is Marcia Garrett.
Okay, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello. So I love this conversation. One thing that I'm thinking as I'm listening to all of it is that it sounds like people in the district have lots of strategies and actions that they're constantly taking to help students improve behavior and engage in learning. But there's still a problem. I think, Regan, at the beginning, you stated that it's exhausting for teachers or something like that. And teachers are, wondering if they can even keep doing this. And just recently, a number of the teachers piped in saying, yes, there's that fatigue. When, some smaller number of kids are maybe hijacking over and over again, even though we do, and you guys do, as much as you can to mediate that and help improve things for kids. What I'd like to know is what resources would be helpful, because it sounds like everyone's doing everything they can, but it can't all be done. What resources, what's the wish list to help improve this?
more counselors.
Mandatory parenting classes for new parents.
That's good. Yes, less screen time.
I think the biggest thing, truly, kind of piggyback off of parenting lessons, is the compassion to know that we're all in this together. And when you're struggling with your kids at home, we don't judge you. We want to help. You are part of that kid's success, arguably the biggest part, and we want to support you in whatever way we can. That usually means that we need to have tough conversations from time to time about things like screen time, about things like engaging with your kid around activities, around conversations about vaping, around having those tough conversations about drug testing at home. Right? These are the types of things that truly parents can do that can support us. But the reality is that if our teachers are tired, parents are tired too. And so recognizing that that fatigue is real and reaching out to those resources that we can offer and having the compassion to know that this is the marathon, not a sprint. We might not fix it in November, but we might in December or March.
Another one that's often overlooked is sleep. Adults, we tend to run on less sleep than we need, and you can tell when that's happening, but you're an adult with tools and coffee. And children, especially the younger crowd, I will constantly speak for them, they don't have tools or coffee, hopefully. And when they don't have enough sleep, they can be manic. It is very hard to sustain and control your little body for a full day, especially when you're tired. And so sleep is a huge factor. It's very surprising if you're 5 and you have to get up at 6:15 to get ready for school, or 6:45, you need to be in bed and asleep at 7 or 7:30. And we have just a lot of kids with no bedtime, a 9 o'clock bedtime. I can stay up till 11 on the weekends. They need sleep.
I would like to add something that can seem quite small. I think that it's important that we can have, the students can have somebody to look upon, or a speaker to hear, or something inspirational that will help them, motivate them to do better outside of the district. For example, speakers, or can read inspirational books in school, in curriculum, influence writing more, maybe reading more, influence discussions more, activities that can be beneficial and can keep them engaged. And I think that we lack that a little bit at our school, but I think that we're definitely have a good staff body that can help them get increased and can help students do better.
I'm going to add one that I think is distilled from many conversations I've had with staff and students, and that is the notion of a timeout. Sometimes we're getting to a place where both people or multiple people involved, adults and children, just need some time in a different space or in a different way. And schools don't necessarily always have that available. I know our school district is really not one equipped to do that, but sometimes, we all know this, when you have a little bit of a marital spat, or you have something go on with your kids, it's great just to walk away. And schools are very intimate places. Sometimes I think we just need a pause.
Hello, my name is Sally Bays. I have 7 kids, ages 2.5 to 20. One at Helen Holler, one at Gray Wolf, and one that we're homeschooling because we didn't feel like the middle school was a good place for him. He's kind of on the spectrum and was late to the social making friends thing. It was only about a year ago he decided he needed to interact with people. And we realized that putting him in the middle school wasn't going to be a good way of a no-fail or a low-fail environment. Which kind of brings me to my questions. Well, I'm also a substitute para and a sub. And every time I've been in the schools, it's wonderful. There's just amazing admin teams who are so generous with these children, and so patient, and extend to them resources that I cannot see how they have the emotional wherewithal to do so day after day after day. It's amazing. But that means that that 1% or those 2% of people are getting so many resources that maybe there's not quite enough for those kids that are otherwise falling through the cracks because they're not misbehaving or they're not vocal about their needs, right? We put out the fires first and then we take care of the other things. But if we're always putting out fires, there aren't the resources for the other things. So how can our district get more resources for the kids who aren't that tier 3? And I mean, is it coming or do we need to drum it up? Like, how do we do this?
Okay, I'd like to start this with a panel by just speaking to some of the resources that you wish you had and about effects that are on the 80% of the students or more sitting in your classrooms that may be affected.
I can't really speak to on all the resources that we may need, but I can say that there is a SAP at the middle school and a SAP at the high school. So if you know anybody who may be slipping through the cracks, refer them to me or Laura Kaufman. Laura Kaufman is amazing at her job. Luke and Laura, I'm sure you guys might get that reference if you don't. With that said, like, we're trying to support as many kids as possible. So if you know someone who might be slipping, please reach out. If you have a high school student that is not having those tier 3 behaviors, like, we would definitely reach out to them, and I can almost guarantee build a relationship.
Luke, the acronym SAP, you wanna?
Oh, sorry, student assistant professional. Sorry, old SAP.
I'm gonna piggyback off of him because that's what I do. I use Loop, right? So if I have an issue or a situation where I have a kid and I look for those kids that are quiet, subdued, not standing out. And I actually look at that. And the reason why I do that is because my daughter was that way. My daughter was really shy and really an introvert. And so by doing that, I have him as an option, which is really good. But then I also try to make that connection with that child, because that's something that you build a relationship. And if you build that relationship, that kid's going to start opening up. He or she's going to open up to you, and you're going to be able to give them some resources at that time. And maybe we call them and we talk to you guys and we talk to the parent and say, hey, we're here for you. Your child's not alone.
There's also like a McKinney-Vento liaison for homeless students. There's a lot more resources than you may know. I have a whole list of ones. We have 2 counselors that come in and work. I don't know exactly what that is, the grant that we have for that.
It's our mental health grant. So we have community counselors that come in and provide mental health counseling right here on our campus. We also have school counselors who are another amazing resource.
Thank you.
Okay, so what I would say to your point is that we as administrators, one of the biggest things that we are always told and we all believe is that we must be visible. And so visible means we're in the classrooms, we're in the hallways, we're in the breezeways, and we're on the fields, we're in the cafeteria. And what that does is it takes away the lack of familiarity that we might have with students to combat or to alleviate what it is that you just talked about, kids falling through the cracks. There you are. And so I would say on the administrative piece, that's something that we're doing all the time. But it's not just administrators, it's counselors, it's teachers being, available, being in the hallways at the middle school or the high school and the breezeways, That being said, there are kids that will fall through, and we are doing our very best through MTSS, through the RTI academic pieces to really mitigate that and to have that be less and less and less. And then I'll also say that what I would love to see more of is ways that we can build community back with our classrooms, back with our students, because that's something that we all have lost. is this understanding what it means to live in a community at times. And we see that through talking about SEL, we see that through conflict management. And then the other piece that I was going to say is that I would love to see community mentoring taking place, because Sequim is an amazing place. It's a retirement resort. We have all of these people that are here. Why not use it? And so however we can kind of tap into that knowledge base, I think that's a win-win.
Two things. This fall, for the first time, we partnered with First Step to offer parenting classes. I have two kids and I can attest they didn't come with an instruction manual. So if they didn't for me, they likely didn't for anyone else. And so just opening that up as an opportunity to people of, hey, we know that this is a hard gig, especially these days that it's hard to raise kids and it's not getting easier. And so looking to provide opportunities for people to be able to build their skill set in doing that. The second thing that I'm really excited about is that beginning in January, we'll have a social worker within the district that can help support, individuals and their families in accessing resources, because I know I can speak for just the students that I spend most of my days with, and they need some more things than just the average family. And so having that person who can help be a resource for them, help them find resources, connect them to things, will trickle down is the goal to their kids and in school.
I truly believe that paras are the lifeblood of our educational system, so we definitely need more paras. So thank you for being a para sub, because when they're gone, the whole world falls apart. Appreciate you.
I was just gonna say that I worry about kids falling through the cracks a lot in my classroom, and because people do take over the learning environment, and I can see that the kids that are doing the right thing often suffer. So I feel like really crowded classrooms are a detriment to that, and at least in my classroom, I don't have para support, and so having more adults around to interact with kids and to learn what drives them and what they're passionate about would be amazing. Wish list.
Okay, I heard no surprises there. It absolutely is the case that in my visiting schools, I heard staffing is incredibly important to our teachers. They want to feel that they have resources for three things. Number one, they would like to have the opportunity to build their relationships with students. So to have some time built in so that they can do that, because right now it's just a whirlwind. Secondly, paraeducator support. So if they do need to step out of a classroom with someone, if they need to have a student have someone at their side to assist them, that help is there. And then also to have some type of programming. And we are actually starting to talk about these things in our district, where you have a classroom space where you learn how to be a learner. And then you go in and trial those skills in the classroom. And you start having a slow ease in until you're able to get it right and sustain it. And some of that's just building endurance with kids, just like when you're running a marathon, you need to have practice. And sometimes a 6-hour day is too long. So also paras on school buses to assist bus drivers has been a resource that's of interest. And I think we all know that for our special education programming that we do, our state funding is not enough to cover all that we try to offer. And when we want to get creative, which we do want to get creative and have tried, we don't have the funding to do that. So I would say it'd be a resource area we'd really want to look to. So thank you for the question. Okay.
Hi, Tim Dasinski. I have a couple of high schoolers currently. I'd like to first say I appreciate all of your time and efforts that you put forth. It's a wonderful effort on your part, so no disrespect to anybody here. I have a question on the statistics for your tier system, 1, 2, 3 tier. I'm wondering if you have statistics on the success rate, so the kids that might have gotten onto that tier 3 or 2, how many of them get off with whatever utilities you use to do that. And my biggest concern It's honestly keeping any kid, my kid, person and their possessions safe. And that has been an issue for one of my two children, primarily. I'm just curious as to, you know, that success rate, and I would like to know more about, given that, you know, severe aggression towards someone, what are those marks that the superintendent of schools set forth for an expulsion? I'd be curious. Thank you.
I'm gonna offer this to the panel, but I'll generalize first. I think the younger the student, the higher the likelihood we will have a student that transitions from a tier 3 down to a tier 2 or a tier 1. The older a student gets in general, I think it's a harder ship to turn. So that's why we are so emphatic about early education and making sure that we're teaching pro-social behaviors. Anything you'd want to add to that comment?
Thank you for the question. On Friday, we covered this exact topic as part of the things that we were discussing as a staff. I can ballpark remember some of these numbers, so please don't quote me like verbatim on this, but school-wide, not speaking about truancies or attendance-related discipline issues, we had 151 tier first offenses, so they have a single entry in Skyward. Our next category had about 90 fewer, so about 60, I think it was a little bit less than that, students had a second offense. It continues on that track until you get to about 5, and then that number weirdly distorts a bit. So you have about 13 to 18 students in that range who have 5 or more offenses. So in our clinical terminology, we call it recidivism. And so our goal as administrators this year at the high school was to reduce our recidivist rate, period. So that's what we're trying to shoot, is when we're having those interventions, that we're using those interventions successfully. So we aren't having to do 5, 6, 10, 15 conferences with a student and parent and so on and so forth. To speak about the specific numbers related to the type of offense or the classification of those offense. Gosh, I mean, I had a bar graph printout that had like 77 defiances this year and like 38 disrespectful language, but we have it broken down categorically. So we were able to examine that as a staff. And Bill can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but we talked a little bit about how, you know, teachers are busy. So sometimes the reporting process, it's easier to just have that conversation and move on with your life. So maybe there's incidences that are not being reported, but they are in that tier 1 category where it's a teacher managed situation. Nevertheless, it was still pretty accurate reading of the blood pressure of where we're at. What are we seeing the most as far as teachers go? And a lot of that stuff was in either tier 1 or repeated tier 1 behaviors. That's where we see the hugely vast majority of our stuff in terms of aggressive behavior or violence or drugs and alcohol. I mean, all those things combined were less than a quarter of what we saw for defiance, right? So those escalated behaviors are a really small subsection of a subsection of this one portion. But the problem is, as we've been talking about, they're widely influential when they happen. They have a real big ripple effect. And so there's a lot of cleanup, I guess, that happens after that for an extended period of time. Does that answer your question?
As far as expulsion goes, expulsion for firearm on campus is, of course, required in the state of Washington. The other offenses that could rise to that level would be severe criminal activity. But we do have situations where we have some violent acts. We might have students getting in severe fights. We've had a few situations where employees have actually been injured by students. They have not reached the threshold for expulsion. They have reached the threshold for emergency expulsion for a limited period of time, so we can make a plan for the student. We can implement a long-term suspension. But we need to be looking at what type of re-engagement plan would come along. And a long-term suspension can be for a significant amount of time, but not kicking a student out of the district entirely under expulsion.
I'm an old lady. I went to school in the dark ages. where the principal was the ruler. And you didn't want to have to be sent to the principal's office because they had a great big paddle. No, that was it. How many agree with me? Our society today is so complex that I can't imagine raising children with the things that they have, see, hear, smell. I can't imagine it. I have great grandchildren, but I had two grandchildren I had in this school system here in Sequim. Unfortunately, I received them both when they were 9 years old. So they were already formed. They had, my grandson had Mrs. Lopez in 4th grade. Unfortunately to say, they both failed in this school system. One dropped out and one didn't graduate at all. Now, I'm not blaming the school system. I'm blaming their early years in their life. And so the parenting thing, people don't understand what they're getting into when they decide to become a parent. I firmly agree with the parenting issue. I just can't imagine how you can deal with these problems, because I had one who got on drugs. Oh, I didn't know what to do. He had to figure it out himself. He had to go to prison and so I commend you for what you're trying to do. However, I do think that we spend too much time on their psyche and not enough on academics. But they have more problems. So that's my experience at 87.
Thank you. Okay, we are at 7:30 hour, and I know our panelists, I thank you for your time. I see we have two folks who would like to make a comment or ask a question. Yes.
Can I just add something really quick? I'm Pat Johnston. I'm a school board member. And the question that I hear the most from people that I was hoping to get some feedback from you on is related to bullying. And we're talking a lot about behaviors in the classroom and how that affects other students who are trying to learn and aren't expressing those behaviors. But I know what I've heard from parents so much is concern about bullying. That's not happening in the classroom. It's happening in the passing periods. It's happening in gym. It's not happening in a way that's disrupting the classroom, but it's happening in a way that's devastating to their child or their student. But I know it's very hard for a student who is being bullied to go to an authority figure. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to be the kid who's getting kids in trouble. And so what is our strategy for that, and how can we help kids who are being bullied get help?
Well, I don't have all the answers, but I guess what I would share with you is, again, it's complex, but we have bullying curriculum in our building. And I'm thinking everybody else does as well. So some of that is about teaching the bully, and other pieces of that is how not to be bullied, and how to stand up for yourself till an adult. So when we do find an instance of bullying in the school, we investigate that. We can make a safety plan for kids for both sides of the coin, and we can make a play plan for them at recess, those kinds of things. But it's all about reteaching how students need to treat each other, right? If you're the bully, there's lots behind the reason why they're bullying. So us getting underneath the layers of why they feel the need to bully, that's where we get to start, right? And it's way deeper. And Marcia Garrett asked about what our wish list was. Mine was the same as Luke's. It's to have a therapeutic mental health counselor in our elementary buildings, because we just see the need for it over and over and over again. And we hear from parents over and over and over again, they can't even get in to see a counselor, and they've tried. And so that's the wish list. Does that help, Pat?
Yeah, I think that a lot of times the older kids, I'm thinking middle school kids are like bullying curriculum, you know, and that, you know, the kids do it anyway. And so, you know, it does damage, like I said, it does damage. And I know you're trying to work with the kids who are doing the bullying, but the problem is, what do you do for the kids who are receiving the bullying? How do you get them to reach out? And that's just like, that's what I hear. I don't have kids in the schools right now, but that is what I hear from families, the most, and that they have the biggest concern. And more at the middle school, and really middle school level, I think is where you hear about it.
And I know we have a couple of folks that need to head out, so please do at this time, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm not a fan of bullying at all. I'm such a right fighter. I do not like it. I always encourage students, especially at the high school level, to report it. There's incident reports that can be filled out anonymously, and I always hear, "Oh, I ain't no snitch," yada, yada, yada. And I just encourage, I'm like, hey, you don't have to put your name on it. The bigger the paper trail, the more they can act as administrators to you know, find a remedy for that.
Thank you.
I'll make it quick. I just wanted to reinforce that idea of younger kids need more sleep. I'll tell you, my 7-year-old is kind of an advanced reader, and he came home from school with the email note to, or not email note, the note to the family about blah, 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 and here's what's going on, and here's something we recommend. And he read that. He's a pretty good reader for 7, and found the part where he should go to bed at 7:30, and he said, "I'm gonna do that." And I was kind of stunned, but I said, "Yeah, it's true. You know, younger kids do need more sleep." And the next morning, when I fixed him breakfast, it was almost pleasant. He was a different kid, so it's easy to blow off simple advice, but sometimes it's simple stuff that's right is really worth paying attention to.
I would just say, if you're waking your child up and they're not waking up on their own, they're not well rested. So you got to back up that bedtime until they're getting up at the right time, completely on their own, and a lot more pleasant. Thank you.
Super briefly, my name is Eric Pickens. I'm the school board president. For those that don't know me, I just want to share that a few questions came up about resources and are there more coming? And our staff does such an amazing job, and they talked about the relationship piece, which is huge, so important. But the question about resources and are more coming? Yes, sort of, but not enough. And a lot of that needs to come from the state level. We need funding. We do not have enough. Everyone heard the needs that are out there. They're significant, and I'm sure that our staff will continue to do everything that they can, but definitely more resources are needed. And so I just wanted to share that with the room, just to, you know, we all need to advocate as a community for that wherever we can. So thanks.
And I'd like to thank our board of directors. They are active legislative advocates. We are out there. I just met with advocates on Friday, Senator Wellman, Representative Chapman, making sure we're getting our base. We had a visit here from our legislative contingency. We walked them around part of our campus. So we do have connection, and we'll be going to Day on the Hill most likely in January. So we'll keep up the request for resources around the wish list. Well, I need to say thank you to our audience. Thank you to our panelists. And I really believe talking about it gets you one giant step closer to solution. And I want to shout out to our students, because they are here for the right reasons most of the time. And I don't want to forget that, because our schools run every day. Thanks to all of you. Thanks to how students are coming. So we'll keep up the good fight. Thank you all.